we've been looking at these arcane laws, these mysteries, and they can be found hidden in fairy tales. They can be behind superstitions, and they can be in simple stories like this one. So let's see if we can glean the arcane law that's embedded in this simple tale. A simple tale of a king who ruled a kingdom that was called Paradise. But it was really no more paradise than any other kingdom, except that the king was a very wise man, and he lived by the law that if he treated people well, they would treat him well. Someone like that do unto others thing. So if people had problems, he would try to solve them for them. But if he couldn't, he would lend them a sympathetic ear and give them some kind of consolation. So, of course, this filtered down into his kingdom. Friends looked after friends, neighbors looked after neighbors, and if strangers came into town, they would be given courtesies, hospitality, and so forth. But, things change. And the king was getting old, and he had to hand over his kingdom to his son. Well, of course, the king died, but his son was not the same man as his father. He was selfish, hedonistic, as we would call it, and certainly not so caring as what his old father, the king, was. So it came about that his ministers came to him and said, "Oh, in the far corner of your kingdom there's a famine, the children are starving, they have no food." And the prince rather petulantly said, "Oh, what's happening?" And they explained that the harvests had failed and there was no food to feed the children. Well, as the king took up a nice big juicy apple off a plate beside him, he said, "Oh, well, never mind, it's not my problem." So another group of ministers came to him and said that somehow the waters of a river had been poisoned somewhere else in the realm. And the same thing happened. Rather petulantly, as the king took up a nice cool glass of water, he said, "Oh, that's not my problem." So, of course, this began to filter down throughout the whole kingdom. Neighbors no longer cared for neighbors. Friends no longer cared for friends. And certainly no hospitality was given to strangers when they came in. And the catchphrase was, "Oh, that's not my problem." So, of course, the kingdom languished. It was not the same paradise as it had been. But there was one man who remembered how it was. He was called Fisherman. He'd retired now, but he remembered. And he thought to himself, "What can I do?" So he decided that he was going to refurbish his old fishing boat into a yacht. And so he began his work, restoring his old boat. And people would come along and see it taking shape and the beautiful colors as it was freshly painted. Asked him what he was doing, and they said, "Oh, you're going to take us for a ride in your boat when you're finished?" "Yes, everyone will be invited," said Fisherman. So it came about that after a year, Fisherman had refurbished his boat. It was the fanciest yacht that you could see. And he invited everyone to come out for a picnic on his yacht. Even the prince, who was now the king. So everyone went out. It was a beautiful sunny day, and they sailed out to the middle of a great lake, and there they took out their picnic baskets, and everyone had a delightful time. But the day wore on and the wind started to pick up, and people said, "Oh, we're going back in now?" And the fisherman said, "Yes, in a minute, I've just got something I want to do before we go back." And he took out a hammer and a wedge, and he began to hammer a hole in the hull of the boat. And people started to see him, and they, "What are you doing? What are you doing?" He said, "Oh, I'm just hammering a hole." And they said, but if you hammer a hole, there'll be a hole in the boat and we'll all drown. Why are you doing this? He said, "It's my boat, it's my hammer and my wedge, I can do whatever I like." And he kept on hammering. Well, everyone got very agitated and they said, "Call the king, call the king." So they called the king over, and in his royal robes and in his deepest voice, he said, "What are you doing?" Fisherman said, "I'm hammering a hole." King said, "Well, what are you doing then? If you make a hole, there'll be a hole in there, the water will come in, we'll all drown. It's my boat, my hammer, and my wedge, I can do what I want." And he kept on hammering. Well, the king started to lose his voice, got a bit tinnier and squeakier, and he said, but if you do that, we'll all drown." The fisherman ignored him, and then the king started to sweat. He said, but I don't want to die. I don't want to die. What are you doing this for?" The fisherman said, "It's my boat, my hammer, my wedge, I can do what I want." But the king, with tears running down his face now, said, but. Fisherman said, "If you want to die, that's your problem. That's not my problem." Fisherman remained silent for a moment, and then the king said, "If I have a problem, you have a problem. And if you have a problem, I have a problem. And if all of us have a problem, then it's everyone's problem because we're all in the same boat." And all of a sudden it was like a revelation to the king. And he repeated exactly what he'd said. "I have a problem, you have a problem, you have a problem, I have a problem. If someone has a problem, it's everyone's problem because we're all in the same boat." "Ah," said the fisherman as he stopped hammering. "We can all go back in shore now." And after that, things in the kingdom began to change again. No one ever said, "It's not my problem" again. If someone had a problem, there would be those who came to help them, and they would use the catchphrase, "If I have a problem, you have a problem. If you have a problem, I have a problem. If we all have a problem, we're all in the same boat." The kingdom became a paradise again. What is the law? The arcane law. Remembering what arcane means. That's embedded in this very simple story. What's your experience? Now, of how you live your life in this place where stillness, presence, absolute presence, attention, awareness meet with the incoming experiences, meetings, encounters, movement of life. recognizing that in this place we transcend those three levels of mind. The sensual, the aesthetic, the transcendent, which of course is only the level of oneness. Transcending those three levels of mind, to be in this place where stillness and movement meet. What is it that is arising more and more evidently in your life as a consequence of this? Looking back to that old saying, take all perceptions. What happens now to the perceptions that enter into our life, pass down these channels, and elicit from us inevitably a response, not a reaction, a response? What is the law behind this response? What happens at that meeting of stillness and movement? What is it that provides the impetus for the response? What is that response? What is the law embedded in this simple story? The other day, the little story was reminded of Jesus walking down the road with several of his disciples. And people jeered at him, sneered at him. And he turned around and, putting his hands together, blessed them. Afterwards, one of his disciples said, "Why did you do that? Why didn't you respond to them by scolding them, chiding them?" Jesus said, "I can only spend what I have in my purse." What's behind this for us? What have we discovered about this state of being?
The pain of the world is our pain and the joy is our joy.
No, right. Yes, that we know and experience every moment.
It's mutual that when we hurt ourselves, we hurt others.
Yes,
When we help others, we help to heal ourselves.
we do. The laws that arise out of this arcane law. But what is that arcane law?
Cause and effect.
Cause and effect is part of the level of creation.
And if we looked after each other, we'd be a lot happier.
Certainly this arises out of these stories, but we've already embraced oneness, interrelatedness, wholeness. What we're seeking lies beyond these three.
Strength and unity.
Okay, let's look at what you have in your purse.
To the response of the whole for the part which is not separate from the whole.
Right, yes. absolutely, in a nutshell. But what is this law? What is it?
Emptiness has no problem.
Oh, right.
I didn't hear.
No, I don't know.
Emptiness has no problem. So let's take it from there, shall
There's nowhere mud can stick.
we? That's right. That's right.
Years ago, they used to call people empty head, and you take it as an insult, but now it's not like
No,
that.
it's the greatest compliment that someone can give us. And that leads us into what has been spoken about, that doorway that's been spoken about over these last weeks. What is it that lies behind stillness? And that's where we need to